Okay, good evening, ladies and gents. Welcome to our second last week, week 11, being the Australian consumer law. All right, unless there's anything else you'd like to discuss, anything at all you'd like to talk about?
The tutorial participation, is that online, or does that include what we've discussed here? Because I've discussed it and not posted it. So
let me, someone else sent me an email this afternoon. Let me research that and get that back to you, because I don't want to make a mistake, and I know you've all been very enthusiastic, but just let me get that back to you on that. If I haven't got back to you by this time tomorrow, can someone send me an email?
And I also was confused by the first question in the study guide. Like, I mean, I don't want to take up a lot of time, but it says, which of the following is not an indicator of an unfair contractual term? And to me, I must be confused because, you know, the answer is B, which is a standard agreement between, oh no, sorry, I'm in the wrong section now. Let me go up to the first section.
We talked about page 10 of the guide, are we?
Yeah, page 10, question 1. Which of the following is not an indicator of an unfair contractual term? And the answer you've got down the bottom is B, exercise of unfair market power by a retailer. And I would have thought that that's also, isn't that part of it as well? Like I couldn't, like the other three, yes, I agree, but I must be a bit confused, because from everything I've read so far and everything, I'm just thinking, well, isn't it about the exercise of unfair market power by a retailer that's brought this about?
Maybe Anthony had something more in the back of his mind. There are extensive provisions about market power where Coles and Woolworths start pushing people around using their market power.
Okay.
So he may have had more in it than it appears, but that's the case. The reason why this doesn't fit in here.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
Good legal thinking. All right, so let's keep on going. Like we've done in the past, what I'd like to do is just skim through the law, just to make sure we've got it, talk about it a little bit, a couple of examples here and there, and then we'll attempt our examples. Okay, so we're talking about the Australian consumer law. Can someone just quickly give me a background of why do we have this? Because in the law studies that you'll be doing in the British-based system, which we've inherited, most law subjects are very, very substantially legislation-based, and that's been considered by courts. Therefore, we have court cases as well, the common law. But can someone give me a bit of a background about contracts?
Well, it was sorry.
Go, Mary, go.
Mary,
I was just, in my sort of way of thinking about it, there was, you know, case law that had developed over many years, and then states started to get legislation going to protect consumers, and then in 2010 the Commonwealth thought, well, no, we've got to do something here, and so they developed the Australian consumer, you know, protection laws and stuff. So
well done.
That's sort of my summary in my head. Is that correct?
Yeah, good. Because as we go back to the first week, the philosophy was you can do whatever you want in the contract, except it can't be illegal and a few other little things like that. But in essence, the people can do what they want. And when you go back into history, you'll see that the size of the businesses weren't really that big. Now we have ginormous firms like BHP Billiton, Coles, Woolworths, etc., who can easily push around, if they wanted to, their suppliers. And there can be a lot of unfairness involved. And so what's happened is, over a period of time, the common law has not moved with the times, and legislation has come in, sits on top, and has protected certain vulnerable people, and one of which is consumers. And hence, over the years, we had this hodgepodge of different legislation, fit for purpose, statutory guarantees, all that sort of stuff, state by state, territory by territory. And as you probably have read, or when you saw the lecture, the unfortunate thing about that is, if, Mary, you started a business and you were across the eastern states, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland, theoretically you have 3 sets of laws to consider, although they're pretty similar, but they do differ. What a hassle. And so what's happened is that everything's under one roof now. the states and territories still retained all the old stuff, but sitting on top of that is this Australian consumer law, which is what we're looking at. And basically, it's there to protect the consumer. And there are other aspects to it in relation to business. So can someone tell me what a consumer is? Who a consumer is?
Anyone that purchases anything under about $40,000 roughly, that's going to use it for their own personal use?
Yeah, and that's good. And we'll just keep it really straightforward and simple. Now, we want to talk about the first part of basically two parts. The first part is the unfair contract regime, and the second part is the consumer guarantee. So if we stick to the unfair contract regime, can you tell me what is the effect if a contractual term has been held by the court to be unfair? What is the legal effect?
The Act says it's void, but what it really says from what I've studied is that it's voidable by the consumer that's entered into it.
Yeah, and why do they say it's voidable? I agree with you.
They're unfair terms.
Yeah.
Like there's a disadvantage to the consumer as opposed to the retailer, like the person that's got the power.
Yeah. Well, look, if the court holds it, no, so if you reckon it's unfair, and you go to the court, and the court says it's unfair, what'll happen is the court will pluck that clause out. But if you wanted to keep it there, let's void it. Hello, what's your name?
Shane.
Shane. Hey, Shane, Mum is just doing a bit of work here. You can sit down there if you want, okay? You can be a lawyer in the future.
Go that way. Sorry.
Oh, Shane?
No, that's Ryan. He's turned 9 last week.
9, big boy. I think it's another 9 years he'll be in law school, okay? So I lost train of my thought. Where was I?
The consumer.
Consumer. What was I talking about?
About the power between the retailers and the consumers. And
Yeah. Well, the whole idea is to protect the consumers, and so therefore, it's over the years it became more obvious that the size of organisations were getting bigger, and you and I were still staying in our own size, and so therefore something had to be done. And in the year 2000, we got 2010. Sorry, we got this unfair contracts regime, and it was just that. He said if there were contracts deemed to be unfair, the clause would be plucked out, and if possible, the contract would remain without that clause, if possible. In most cases, it probably would be. So this unfair contracts regime was, as we said, it tries to assist. Now, in order to work out whether it's unfair or not, first of all, it's got to be in relation to a consumer contract, it's got to be in relation to a standard form contract, and it's got to be unfair. And so when the legislators were looking at this, they said, look, there's a whole lot of unfair gymnasium type contracts, airline contracts, all sorts of stuff like that. We've got to do something about it. And so you really have to remember 3 things. Is it a consumer contract? Is it a standard form contract? And is the term unfair? Okay, pretty straightforward. The detail, of course, you have to get used to it, but you just need to show those 3 things. So we've already just done, is it a consumer contract? So we can tick that one. And we'll have a look at these when we do our tutorial questions at the end. Now, as to the standard form contract, would someone like to volunteer and give me a quick summary of what a standard form contract is?
Well, standard form contract would be what a lot of companies use, like for the building industry, you'd use a standard form contract between a client and a builder.
Yeah.
That's pre-created by a third party or someone.
And there is an additional aspect. It's on a take it or leave it basis.
Yes, correct.
You've got to have that because it's basically forced upon you. And if it's not a consumer contract, there are 3 aspects I just gave you. Consumer contract, unfair contract, consumer contract, standard form contract, and unfair term. You must have all 3. If one of those 3 is not there, you can't use the unfair contract regime. Yeah. So is it a standard form contract? So it's got to be forced upon you, or it's got to be that people make veiled threats to you when they're pushing this onto you. Okay. Now, as was said in the lecture, these standard form contracts are actually quite good in theory, is because there are lots and lots of transactions. They're all basically identical. However, large businesses could become very tempted in slipping some terms, and that's where the common law fell down. It didn't have enough protection for these vulnerable people, in essence being you and I. We have a large Coles or Woolworths who are pushing us with very, very onerous terms. Okay, so if a consumer, being you or I, we go to the court and we say that's unfair, the onus is then on the supplier to state why it's not unfair. Okay, the onus is on them. And there are a number of factors the court will consider. I just pulled out my Australian consumer law. I've got my reporter here, Australian consumer law. You go to section 27, and there's a whole stack of, here it is, examples on unfair terms. A term that permits or has the effect of permitting one party but not the other party to avoid or limit performance, etc. So, look, you only have to look through these, and clearly they're unfair. On the face of it, I'm not saying it's guaranteed to be unfair, but they have the sniff of unfairness about them. All right, so that's the second of the three elements, and the most detailed of the third element is the actual term has to be unfair. So any one of you, can you just give me a quick summary of what being unfair is all about? Michael, what being unfair is all about?
Unfair would be, I guess, terms and conditions there that are not, I guess, on some form of even level, that you have not been shown the fact that they're in these terms and conditions may be in there as well.
Yeah, as Anthony said in his lecture, he said it's just got the feel of unfairness about them. And those clauses, A, B, C, all down to MN. So there's 14 of them, 14 of those, which are pretty standard. One which will become pretty obvious to us later on, G here, that's 25G, little g. A term that permits or has the effect of permitting one party unilaterally to vary the characteristics of the goods or services to be supplied, or the interest in land to be sold or granted. So basically, unilaterally, by one side only, to vary the characteristics of the goods or services to be supplied. I buy an apple and I'm given an orange. Yet they're still both fruit, but they've been changed. All right, so that's as an introduction. Let's have a look at the factors. We've got a number of factors to consider. Significant imbalance, not reasonably necessary, and causing a detriment. So can anyone just briefly explain to me what significant imbalance means? Significant imbalance in rights and obligations.
Well, that the retailer has power over the consumer in the contract. So the smaller party is disadvantaged by the more powerful party? Yeah.
And what did the case of Director of Consumer Affairs and AAPT say? What was the what did we get out of that case?
Unfair terms. If they're too favourable, then the contract can be voided.
Yeah, that's one aspect. He also spoke about the definition of imbalance must be significant. He said something to the effect that it's going to be important. In other words, it's that they try to give some sort of measure to it.
Yeah. Broad power.
Sorry.
Broad power.
I think they mean significant imbalance. What he's trying to say is trying to give a definition of significant, and that's saying it's something like important or of consequence. Significant. Maybe it's a bit beyond the scope of this course here, but
It's kind of like not being really ripped off by somebody. Like one of the things that they said, like if you go to an expensive boutique and you enter into buy clothing which you could get for like half the price at a cheaper shop, that's okay. But if that's your choice, you've chosen to do that. But if it's significant, it's going to have it's a different situation altogether. It means that there's a very significant imbalance between the parties, where there's something in the contract that like doesn't allow them to have any comeback if it's voided, or the terms are just so significantly unfair that it's not good enough. It's void. It's considered to be voidable by the court.
Yeah. This may also be dealing with the actual imbalance, the size of the imbalance. It's got to be of significance. But then
it says it doesn't necessarily have to be financial. So I was a bit confused by that.
Yeah, but it doesn't have to be financial, because imbalance could be measured in different ways.
Yep.
It could be an effect. Let's come to that in a second. So the next one along was, and if you want to make a note, that first one was section 24(1)(a). So the next one is 24(1)(b), not reasonably necessary. What do you think not reasonably necessary means?
Well, they've added it in, so it's not your standard contract, and it's not required, really.
Remember, he spoke about the case of...
small print?
Sorry?
In the small print, usually?
Yeah, he gave us a couple of cases. What about the shirts case he spoke about in the lecture? Or if he didn't see the lecture, what about the train station health club case? See, in the train station case, it had a unilateral clause. We can get rid of you if you breach a clause.
Yeah.
Someone got really upset.
Behaviour.
Huh?
If they didn't like the behaviour of the member,
Good.
and they felt that it impacted on the health club,
Good.
then they could terminate your membership.
Yeah. And someone got really upset with that and took it to, what was the year on that? I didn't write it down. Director of Consumer Affairs. It's probably a pre-2000 case. 2010.
2008.
2008. That's 2 years before the ACL. Therefore, it's a Victorian case under similar legislation, or an aspect of that, this aspect here. And they said if a person acts in an obnoxious way in a gym for various reasons, perhaps not wiping the sweat off, etc., they can get rid of it, because they only want to have people who basically fit in. And the person who heard the case was justified with that. But they also said, let's say if Telstra had the power to terminate the case for a minor client error, just doing something really small, that's unreasonable. Okay. I think it was Anthony was speaking about the shirts. So there was two different types of shirts. The first shirt is I go in and buy one off the rack. That one would be tend to, and I took it back again. If there was no refunds or no return policy, that's probably unreasonable. But remember in the case he said that if one had been custom made,
the tailor made it and it was custom made, that's a different story, because it's not something that's easily resellable to someone else. Yeah,
and I think most people would say that would be an unreasonable. Actually, it is reasonable to say to someone, "Look, this has been custom made for you. We can't get rid of it." Now, of course, if I've worn the first shirt for a couple of days and I ripped all the tags and stuff like that, that's also unreasonable for me to want to get a refund.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, causing a detriment. Anyone give me a bit of a feel of what that's about?
Well, that's going back to the train station health club.
Yeah.
So they're making a detriment towards the club or the health club. They can remove someone, because if someone could come in and make it unreasonable for anyone else to work out.
Yeah.
And then and it comes back to contractual terms. So
it's at someone's own discretion. Like, you know, like someone makes a discretion about somebody, and it could even be taken as far as someone they don't like. You know what I mean? And they, so you know, it's unfair, and it's
all back to that shirt story, as you say. It depends on what the story is, if it's custom or if it's just off the shelf.
Well, see, that's the thing, and I mentioned it a couple of times over the course of this term, is that this is not a physical science where we put two numbers together or two chemicals together and we do the addition or the chemical test 1,000 times, and in every single case you get the same answer. This is not a physical science. This is a social science. You will not get, in every case, nice, neat answers. There will be overlaps. There will be grey areas, depending on the facts, and even then, it's going to be difficult. So these are the things that you have to be prepared for if you want a career in the law, either directly or indirectly. It's just like that. A lot of the cases that you'll read about are close to the borderline, because that's the reason why someone took them to court. I mean, why would you, unless you're an eccentric or you had a hidden agenda, why would you go to court and spend lots and lots of cash if it's a pretty clear-cut case? Okay? So generally speaking, we don't get clear-cut cases, and the poor old judge has to sit there and weigh them up. And literally, they weigh them up. They put factors on that side, factors on that. I think there's the factors on this side have it, and so it goes in that direction. The decision's made that way there. So going back, we have, remember, the factors in relation to is an unfair term. We have significant imbalance, which we discussed, not reasonably necessary. Now we're talking about causing a detriment. So you need to cause some sort of detriment. And this is something you have over and over again in the English law, which we've inherited, is that you will not have an action unless there is damage, loss. Okay, so I can be as negligent as I want driving my car around the place. If I don't hit anyone, cause any damage, that's not negligent, you know. I can breach a contract with you, Michael, but you've suffered no loss. Well, therefore, you won't get a remedy out of me. Okay, so this is just another variation on the theme here. So it's it's usually financial detriment to the consumer. That's the usual way. And they're the things we need to have a look at. Now, as I said to you before, under section 23.1, I'll read it out to you, it's very short. Section 23.1, a term of a consumer contract or small business contract is void if the term is unfair and it's a standard form contract. Okay? So it's unfair or a standard form contract. And so if it's that, it's void, it's plucked out, and the contract remains as long as it can keep standing on its own 2 feet without that clause. Now, we have a couple of exceptions to this rule. There are 3 exceptions. What would those exceptions be? It's section 26. And why I'm sitting here with the legislation here is I just thought I'd look it up because in your career, what you on occasion may wish to do, and particularly when you have a subject with lots of legislation, you just follow it. Because the lecturer says it in a particular way. In a tutorial like this, I'll speak it in a certain sort of way, and you might write down that way, but it's when you read it, you get the full text of it, and you can read it and see it. So what was I talking about here? Key exceptions.
Key exceptions. So, like it says that there are 2, and that's like the main subject matter and the upfront price.
Yeah. And why are they exceptions?
Well, an unfair provision relates to the main subject matter anyway. Okay. It doesn't necessarily void the unfairness, but that's the basis upon which the whole contract is made. Do you know what I mean? Exactly.
Because what happened is that it's a standard form contract.
Yeah.
Being put in front of you. There's a temptation for the supplier to hide clauses. The ones they really can't hide are what the subject matter is and the price. exactly as you said. And the third one here, there might be some other ones which the laws expressly exclude. And there's always something which is excluded, and so that's a helpful one to have. But what I like about Anthony's notes and his lectures, he explains the background, and it's so vital to understand the background. Once again, large suppliers, many transactions, standard form contract, not a problem. Then there's a tendency to slip things in to the detriment of the consumer. Those things which are slipped in, if unfair, they become the subject matter of an unfair contract, subject to any exceptions. So it's good to know the background. Okay? In the lecture, he said there are other examples of unfair contract terms, section 25. Now, I've just given you those. There was 14 of them there. And again, I'll read G out. But I'll actually read the whole section. Without limiting section 24, the following are examples of the kinds of terms a consumer contract or small business contract that may be unfair. G, a term that permits or has the effect of permitting one party unilaterally to vary the characteristics of the goods. Now, you just get the feel just by reading that. Now, just remember, they are not to be taken as gospel. They're just indicators of what it could be, and it's not a complete list. Now, just while I'm there, I sent you an article on the new Small Business Unfair Contracts Terms legislation. Don't expect you to have read it, but just to let you know that as suppliers, as organisations grow and grow, so does their power in relation to small business. So the difference between the large business and the small business gets bigger and bigger, and the ability to abuse also increases. So there'll be a lot of talk about, especially, and I don't want to pick on these two, but they were in the news, Coles and Woolworths basically pushing the farmers, the orchardists, the people who have the eggs, the dairy people, etc., pushing them around big time. And so for some time they've been talking about, and in 2015 legislation was passed, and they gave it 12 months to come in, and that 12 months ended on the 12th of November 2016. So it's about 14 months now we've had this new legislation. It is not dissimilar to consumer contracts. There's three parts to it. Is it a small business? Is it a small business? Is it a standard form contract, as we know? And is it an unfair term? So two of the three parts we know already. And small business is all about goods and services. The business has to be less than 20 persons. The amount of money, the upfront price, it's got to be less than 300,000 if it's a contract for a year, or less than $1 million if it's over a year. And it's got to be in trade and commerce. And so therefore, if I'm a large business and Mary, you're a small business, and I force you into a contract on a take it or leave it basis, and as long as you fit into the criteria of a small business, either as buyer or seller, but in this case, I'm selling to you, you're the buyer. That clause, what can happen to the unfair clause? What do we do with it?
Taken out.
Can be taken out.
And if possible, the contract will keep standing. Okay, so I had a lot to do with that in the introduction, and making sure organisations were fit and ready for that. I just mentioned it. It's a business part, and it's an addendum to what we've done. And you can see how the law thought hard. The government thought hard on how to protect, and wanted to use, in this case, existing legislation, and basically it extended it. The one we spoke about tonight had three parts to it: consumer contract, standard form contract, and unfair contract terms. And the small business one, all it says is, instead of being a consumer contract, it's a small business contract. Okay, and that's defined as certain dollar value, certain number of people on staff. I'm not going to speak any more about that. I just want to let you know it all basically dovetails in with that. So what we've done now, we've spoken in essence about the provisions that affect formation, interpretation of contracts, and these unfair contracts are important. And the next part of that we're going to talk about are the aspects of the Australian consumer law. Again, we need to look at, is it a consumer contract? And of course, we've done that already. Is it an unfair contract? Oh, we've done that already. That's what I'm talking about. Consumer guarantees we're doing now. And can you contract out of these? Yes or no?
Yes.
Well, you can.
Go on, Michael.
Well, you can. It just depends on the circumstances. Like, have you significantly reduced the price, and so on.
Okay. So let's do it the other way around. Work on the assumption. In most cases, you can't. I'm not saying you're wrong or anything like that. I'm just saying is that the purpose of these imposed implied conditions is to protect the public. Now, I shouldn't pick on Coles, all these big places, Harvey Norman, etc., the big ones with power, all they've got to do is write in their contract, we contract out of it. And then the government's genuine efforts are thwarted. So what they do now, they say, you can't contract out. So if you work on that assumption, and if you really weren't sure, and you put in a paper that, you're more than likely to be correct, because that's the whole philosophy. Now, other implied conditions, I suppose common law fitness for purpose, you can contract out of that, but here there's an express provision you can't. So let's have a look at it here. Okay, so the four groups of consumer guarantees. Well, actually, the two groups. The first group is goods, and the other one is services. Okay, so let's talk about goods first, because it's important that we look at those. So I've got three categories. Okay, goods to free title, so guarantees to free title of goods, guarantees to quality and fitness, and extended protections. Let's have a look at guarantees to free title of goods. What does all that mean? Anyone?
It means you have to own it to be able to sell it, or be in a capacity that you have the power or the lawful right to sell something. Yeah,
because when I buy something, I want all the rights which go with owning it, and they include, if I was crazy enough for me to want to destroy it, if I wanted to, if I want to repaint it, I want to cut it in half. They're my goods, And so there's three aspects to it, and that's sections 51, 52, and 53. And the first aspect is ownership rights.
And then the goods have to actually, be what they say they are. They can't be damaged. Like, they've got to be able to, whatever you're buying has to work, and it can't be damaged. And
yeah, that's basically that the person owns it. The second one is possessory rights, section 52.
Yes.
So therefore, you have the right to the possession of it. See, as Anthony said in the booklet and in the lecture, there is a distinction. And I have a book. I hand it to Mary. We don't know what arrangement to an outsider who hasn't heard what's going on, doesn't know whether she owns it, but certainly knows that she possesses it. Yeah. She might own it if she's bought it from me, but if I've lent it to her, I still own it. But we certainly know that she possesses it. So there's a distinction between the two. And this pen, I own it and I possess it. So I've got both of those. But as a owner, I have the right to possession, and if I wish to rent it out, I can. and I can rent it out by giving it a lend to you, or I can rent it out, and in return I get what's called a royalty, a rent, and if it's intellectual property, it's called a royalty. Now, the next one is security rights. What does that mean? Section 53.
Goods are free from undisclosed securities or charges.
And what does that mean in ordinary language?
If you buy a car and it's under finance, then you need to know that.
Yeah. Let's use a real estate example. Mary, I go buy a house. You're the bank. It's a $500,000 house, and you lend me $200,000. I've got 300 of my own from the previous house, and you have a mortgage on the place. That's called a charge. Okay. Its more simple version is a car, a $30,000 car, and I owe the bank $10,000. Okay, and they've put a charge across it. So if you go to the motor vehicle registration documents, if you search it up, there'll be a charge on it. And so when I buy something, it's bought free of all these charges. So that's the first category of the three categories: goods, guarantees to free title of goods. The second category is guarantees to quality and fitness. Okay, and we've got 4 sections here. So there's 4 guarantees in this, which will be implied into every consumer contract. So if you don't see them there, it's not the common law which is doing this. This is legislation which specifically adds it in. One of the positive things about legislation is, generally speaking, it's clear. And as you can see here, you all know what legislation looks like. It's just a list of rules. And we've got sections 54, 55, 56, and 57. Let's take them one at a time. Goods will be of acceptable quality. What does that mean? Section 54.
Fit for purpose.
Yeah. The quality is, if it's a certain quality has been described, that's what you'll get. Section 55, guarantee as to fitness for any disclosed purpose. Now, if you heard Anthony's lecture, he said that he went and bought a Fitbit watch or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Now, it would have a certain guarantee on it. He said, look, man, I like swimming in the surf. Can I wear it? And the guy looked at the watch and said, oh, yeah, it's okay to 30 meters. So when the instant he walked into the surf, the thing demolished. He went back, and the guy at the shop, another guy at the shop, said, well, it said there, look at the instructions. It said, keep it out of water, and if not, it'll destroy it. And Anthony said, no, excuse me, I went further than that. I disclosed my purpose, being that I need to use it in the water. And your organisation said, yes, based on that, I used it and it destroyed. Therefore, you breached the Australian consumer law and I want a remedy. And he got a remedy on that. You know? He might have had a gun, used a gun as well, but the fact is he was entitled on it. And whether you get it or not, that's another thing. You know?
Yeah.
And it's an important issue. And just as an aside, sometimes it's actually very helpful if you purchase using a credit card, because then you go back to the bank and say, look, I didn't get what I paid for. And I bought a bathtub from an organisation up in Queensland, and the whole thing just didn't work. It had holes in it and rust and stuff like that. And the guy just said, no, just totally belligerent. Wouldn't help, wouldn't answer calls. You know, it was just really, really difficult to deal with. And I just went to the bank and just said, I didn't get what I paid for, sent a few photographs. It was pretty obvious when you see the photographs, got the refund. You know? So the law is good, but it's the enforcement of the law which is a headache as well. You know? So it's got to be fit for its purpose. Its purpose is, I purchased a TV set to watch TV on, unless there's something else which has been so disclosed. And I think Anthony's example of that Fitbit is actually quite a good example there. All right, section 56, goods sold according to description.
Yeah. So that one's mainly used on online selling, is it not?
Yeah, you could do that. I tell you what, I can tell you a funny story. I was doing some work in Perth at some seminars in Perth, and the hotel, there was no nowhere to eat nearby. So I went for a long walk, and there was this shopping centre, and there was this a kebab shop, and it had a picture of a nice kebab, quite a nice one. I said, have one of those, please. And the thing I got looked like it was half dead, and had been half eaten by someone else. It certainly didn't fit according to its description. So that sort of thing. And also, for example, I'm selling I don't know, decorative this or that. I'm in the construction industry. Michael wants to do some work in his house. He buys one, takes it home. He finds that exactly what he wants. Over the phone, by internet, he orders another 100, and they're completely different. So that sort of thing, which would be 56 and 57 is the next one, guarantees relating to the supply of goods by sample or demonstration model. Okay? Because you can't take them all with you. You take one with you or you check it out. And I could be unscrupulous. I have this beautiful, one which I spent 10 times as long to make it. It's really, really well done, and all the rest are pretty shoddy. And you get a box full of shoddies, you don't want that sort of thing. And that's where the Australian consumer law will come in. And out of prudence, you back yourself up, as I said before, perhaps by purchasing with a credit card. All right. Now the next one. So that's goods guarantees as to quality and fitness. We do have some extended protections. What do they mean by extended protections?
They must, if you have a product, they must have parts or be able to fix it or service it within a reasonable period. Good.
That's section 58.
Yeah.
Or unless they're going to tell you that,
Yes.
And that's actually it's important when you buy a car.
Mm.
Now, let's say, for example, there's this, and I'm making this up, a new Chinese manufacturer comes in and they sell you this car, and 2 weeks later they decide, well, no one's buying our car, there's too much asbestos inside or whatever, and they just close up, and you can't get any spare parts for them, that
actually happened to me. I can give you a really personal example.
Please, go on.
When I was working in charge of pediatrics isolation in the Northern Territory, I bought a Lada Niva 4-wheel drive, okay?
Wow.
Within 2 years, you couldn't get any Lada Niva parts in Australia, and that $18,000 4-wheel drive was worthless, $2,000. Couldn't even flog them off. But I didn't know the law, so there was nothing much I could do.
So that's Chinese, is it?
It's Russia.
No, it's actually from Russia.
Yeah.
Russia. It's tough, isn't it? See, as Anthony says in his lecture, and you know yourself, the vast, vast, vast majority of consumers don't know the Australian consumer law.
Yeah.
Think of this yourself.
But it was before that the ACL really. It was before 2010, so like 20 years ago. But still, to me, it was a big loss. I just couldn't believe it. But I couldn't get parts, and what do you do if you can't get parts? You're done.
Yeah, but just go back 1 month ago. How much did you know? How much do you know now in comparison to 1 month ago?
Oh, heaps. I'm overloaded with information, trying to make it really simple so I can understand it. I've learnt so much.
Well, hence the reason why we have tutorials, sort of. I hope I'm not making it more complicated, But the idea with these tutorials is to help. I got to say, I really think Anthony's materials are very good. And I really do like the way the background is explained, because at least with my brain, it sinks in there and it gives me the reason why it's there, and you can call it from there. So we've got the spare parts at section 58. Now, section 59, what's that about? Remember, we're talking about extended protections. That's the second part of it.
Express warranties.
Yeah, express warranties. And what does that mean in plain English?
Well, you're expressing warranty, or express warranties means that they're actually physically stated and they're offered.
Yeah. And if the warranty which you as salesperson have given me, which exceeds the Australian consumer law, which one do I take? Which one is legally acceptable.
Well, they've offered a greater one, so that counts, and it's just backed up by the ACL. So
Well
that's
done.
turned into the ACL law.
Well done. And the last one, so that was those three being guarantees as to free title of goods, guarantees to fitness and purpose, and extended protections. Those three relate to goods. Now it comes to services, and that just consecutively we keep on going with the section numbers. Section 60, so all these relate to services. Guarantee of services to be rendered with due skill and care. Okay, well, that's it's just understandable. If you get someone giving you certain services, a tradie comes, it's see the implied terms under the common law is you get a tradie or someone like that coming in, they will use proper skill and care. In this case, rendered with due skill and care. And this is just, all this is codifying. Codifying means they're putting it into a list of rules, one rule after the other. And this is section 60, so it's quite understandable. Now, section 61, the results of the service must be reasonable quality, that's section 54, and must be fit for purpose, section 55. Oh, sorry, that's like sections 54 and 54 and 55. This is the service versions of goods. Okay, so this is, once again, I didn't say that very well. This is section 61, and the results you get out of the services must be reasonable quality, which is very much like that with goods, which will be section 54, and must be fit for purpose, which is very much like goods, and the goods section will be section 55. Now, the last one is section 62. If contract is silent as to time, what happens then?
Reasonable.
What's a reasonable time?
Depends on the product, but
like they gave examples that, like, if it was a refrigerator or a roof or something, that's essential to sort of keeping people safe and, your food all right, that it has to be done quicker than, say, something like spraying a driveway.
Yeah.
Objective test.
Good. I like it. An objective test. What would the reasonable person standing back, what would they would think would be the a reasonable period of time? And just a reasonable period of time. So that's the two groups of consumer guarantees. And once again, these contracts which we're talking about, you will never see them written in there. The legislation implies those into the contract, okay, as if they were there in the first place. Now, you see how difficult it is for the average person on the street. How would they know these things? And indeed, there are three levels of law, and you know that yourself. You've got the common law down here. Where it's unfair, equity steps in, and another unfairness, or for other reasons, statute. So the poor Joe and Josephine on the street has to know three levels of law. And it is actually quite difficult, but we've all sort of managed. But where it happens is that the average person on the street doesn't know this. They know there is some sort of vague thing called consumer law. They wouldn't know where to find it, and we all just stumble through it. So exemptions from all this, these include those subject to other enforcement regimes. Yeah, so basically these two groups of consumer guarantees, the goods and services, those are implied into consumer contracts. There are a couple of exclusions from that because they have other provisions in other acts of parliament, and therefore they're excluded.
Like lawyers and doctors.
Yeah. Now, remedies. What is your remedy if there is a major defect?
You should be able to get a replacement in a product that's, fit for purpose and what you thought you were getting.
Yeah. You can return and replace it. And if it's a minor defect?
fix.
Well, you should still be able, even if it's got a dent or a scratch, like it's if you want to take it back, they should refund it and give you exactly what it is that you were supposed to buy.
Or compensation.
Yeah, or compensation, get your money back or whatever.
Yeah, and you see this major defect and minor defect are not dissimilar to conditions and warranties. Major defect is like a condition, and a minor defect is like a warranty. But I can't see here the ability to terminate the contract, at least under the this part of the Australian Consumer Law. All right, so what I'd like to do now, so just quickly summarise, tonight is all about the unfair contracts regime and the method of implying consumer guarantees into contracts. That was what tonight was all about, and we need to have a look at that tutorial question, and then we'll finish here. So the tutorial question was our friend, question number 14, Teresa, loves rock and roll music, and she loves bacon. Okay, an unusual combination. And in essence, we've got two questions for her, because there's really two things which happened to her. The festival promoter couldn't get the act they wanted, and then they substituted, and she said that she didn't want that. So would someone like to have a go at that one?
Well, going back to concerts and not obviously seeing terms and conditions, but generally she can't get a refund because there's terms and conditions on there, and generally they are bands will be replaced without notice, and ticket is still there. There's still a festival going on that she's bought a ticket for.
I sort of thought a bit differently. I thought because what the promotion of the ticket was for this main person she wanted to go and see, and then they took that away and just put a local band in. So doesn't that contravene like the condition she entered into? She wanted to see this particular performer, and then that performer goes and just is substituted by a local band. I thought that she had some right there to have some comeback.
I agreed with Michael, because she's bought the ticket for the music festival, not the band itself playing a single solo show. It's like if I go to Dreamworld and the old antique cars isn't working, I don't get my money back because there's still other events happening. I went to the event, not the band.
Well put, Debbie.
Oh, okay. Sorry, it was just the way that I read it. So, okay, under your
festival could mean 30 bands there.
But Anthony is a master of making these questions borderline. What happens, using my language, Rolling Stones coming to this festival, and they understandably got booted out or never allowed because of too much drugs, etc. in the past, and 1 million tickets were sold. And you say, well, hang on, I went to see the Stones. Of course it's a music festival. So Anthony wouldn't have done this, made an easy question out of this. You see what it is? And then you're going to argue, and then you just hope that the judge got out of the bed on the correct side in the morning, okay? But on the whole, Mary, I hate to say it, but I tend to follow Debbie and Michael.
No, I can see their point, because I was thinking in terms of it was a particular concept for something, not in general terms, that it was actually a festival.
Yeah. But I just following it through because you had a good point. Because you had a good point there. Because if it was
promotion for a particular singer, that's different to them just a general music festival. But see, I'm not one. I'm of an older generation. Like I'm not really kind of up to scratch with that. I didn't realise that festivals could involve anyone or everyone. I thought we would go to a concert, but it would be for like John Denver or Barbara Streisand or something like that. But what they're talking about from what they've just said, I get what they're telling me now. I understand. So thanks, guys, because I would have got that wrong.
I've got this new phone. I've taken it out, but it's there. So let's have a look at, because when we go to services, there are three sections: sections 60, 61, and 62. Section 60 is about guarantee of services to be rendered with due skill and care. Is that of any relevance here?
No.
Probably not. Section 61, results of the service must be reasonable quality and fit for a purpose. Is that relevant here?
It's
Well,
hard to
we
say when
assume
you haven't
the
got
band is
groups
still
or
the same
names.
quality.
Go on. Debbie?
Oh, well, I was just assuming the local band was still of a high quality and the festival event itself is still providing a safe environment and a fun environment.
Yeah. And I think that's probably a good way of looking at it. The other part was fit for purpose. Well, there's still a festival where you go and sit around and do what you want to do there. And the last one, section 62, if a contract is silent as to time, I don't think that's relevant here. Okay, so how can we summarize this one? I think more than likely that she can't get her money back. It would be a consumer contract though, because it fits in the definition, but you can't get the money back because it doesn't fit into one of the sections here. Don't forget there could be another reason, or something else that we've studied in the term, but at least under the section 60, 61 and 62 of the Australian Consumer Law, she probably doesn't have a remedy there. Yeah?
If she was just going to the band by themselves as a headliner, not being in an event, I believe she would.
Yeah.
Is that what I was saying? Is that what a headliner is? Sorry, generation gap, I think.
Yeah.
So a headliner means a particular performer is
Main
what
event.
it's promoted as.
Yeah, for example, I missed last week's session because I went to the Foo Fighters, and it wasn't a festival, it was
What,
a Foo Fighters concert.
What?
Foo Fighters concert.
Oh, there's definitely a generation
Mary,
gap. I've lost that.
let's use a term which is more familiar with you and I.
Roy Orbison.
Elvis Presley comes
Elvis
out
Presley,
of
okay, rightio.
Elvis comes out of hiding, okay, and this is his first time back. And
From the grave, yeah.
He actually finds a passport for a change, and he comes to Australia, and he's all set to play at this festival at the back of Noosaheads or something like that, and he doesn't turn up, and everyone's bought a ticket for it. That might be a case. All right, let's go to the next one. This one is Teresa. She's really pissed off about all this, and she thinks, well, I've still got my pork, you know. What happens?
She hasn't got a bacon.
Well, no bacon on the fork. She only got the pork.
I think she should. In that case, I would be really upset because bacon, okay, it's a form of pork, but it's different between ham and bacon. You use in different ways than you use ham.
For me, it was the clause unilaterally replace it with any form of meat at his discretion.
Yeah.
I know. I mean, what if you ordered beef and you got like I don't know, lamb or
religious
dog meat or anything like that? It's too general. It's just.
Well, of course, I'm so ignorant of all this sort of stuff. My friend is a vegetarian, and he doesn't eat red meat. And we were talking about definition of meat, and apparently chicken is defined as meat as well in some quarters. So let's have a look at the facts here. Fourth paragraph near the end. One of the conditions was that if the ordered meat was unavailable, the butcher would unilaterally replace it with any other form of meat at his discretion. And I put a circle around the word meat because what is the definition of meat?
Exactly.
I always thought it was something from an animal. When I say an animal, it's like a cow or a ox or whatever they call the things.
Well, it depends on what country, and it could be a cat, a dog, or a rat, or anything.
Yeah. Which country are you in at the moment, Mary?
I mistakenly, when I lived in Indonesia for a year in Sumatra, went and bought some satay tikus and didn't know what that was till I looked up, the dictionary, because I didn't know any Bahasa Indonesian when I first went there. And tikus was mouse, so I had just eaten satay rat. So What I'm saying is, in some countries, I mean, I had to learn the word for chicken, ayam, and I had to learn things that I wanted to consume. But what I'm saying is, it depends on where you are. It depends on what meat is. And as you said, vegetarians, they refer to meat not as we do, that are non-vegetarian.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it doesn't meet the.
I think it's unreasonable.
It doesn't meet the use of what she wanted it for. Like, she could have been wanting that bacon to make bacon and egg pies. You can't do that with if she'd received beef or fish.
Sure.
So that's section 56. Goods must match the description.
Yes.
Okay, so let's do what we should do best is go through it logically, the first question. Remember how we said the 3 questions. The first question is it a consumer contract? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so we got that out of the way. The second one, is it a sorry, to get the right page here. Is it a standard form contract?
Yes.
No. I've never been to a butcher shop and got something on the back that said if you order
Well, she did.
lamb that I'll give you anything.
She did.
So is that standard? But I'm just asking, was that really considered standard? I'm asking a question. I'm not giving an answer.
Yeah.
I'm saying, is that really standard? I was quite shocked by that.
I've never received a contract at the butcher's.
I was quite shocked by that too. You can order a Christmas ham. You get a Christmas ham. That's about the only, or you can put in your meat order. A dozen sausages or chops or steaks and so much mince or what and you pick up your order. I've never in my whole life ever heard of this.
What is a standard form contract? It is a contract which is given to you, preferred to you on a take it or leave it basis. Now, we have to look at the facts here. Now, in the real world, it'll be very hard because this is he said, she said business, and that's a difficult. But that's not an aspect we have to worry about. That's the question of evidence, which you'll do it later on in your course. But at the moment, what we've got to look at is the provided facts. So let's go back. Teresa, this is 4th paragraph. Teresa was very angry about this. This was about the switch of talent. But she consoled herself by remembering that she still has a bacon. The day before the festival, she returned to the butcher for her bacon, but something was terribly wrong. Her package contained ham, not bacon. Teresa asked the butcher, "Dude, where's the bacon at?" The butcher said he had run out of bacon, but he figured ham was also pig, so it was just as good. So we have to go back to the 2nd paragraph. Second sentence. She purchased her festival ticket in November, and before Christmas she ordered 5 kilograms of bacon from her butcher to be delivered on the 25th of January. The butcher gave her an order form with 5 kilogram bacon written out under order details, and she filled in her name and address at the top, then signed the bottom. She knew there was a bunch of terms and conditions on the back side of the form, but she didn't bother reading them. All she knew was she was wanted bacon and she paid for it in advance. Okay, so where do we go from here?
Well,
Cholesterol heart check.
Did she sign it and agree to it before she looked at the terms on the back or not? I wasn't real sure about that.
Doesn't matter.
I read it twice.
Mary, it doesn't matter.
It was delivered to her before she signed it anyway. It comes back to, like, if you look at the case, you go Lestrange, but as we discussed, Lestrange would, sorry, my dog.
Hello, you're going to be a lawyer too, is he?
Yeah. Lestrange, as we discussed, Lestrange, if that was done today, that will come under ACL and be a different result. And so it's backed up by section 56, goods must match the description, and that overrides any terms conditions he has as per Director of Consumer Affairs Victoria versus AAPT.
Yeah, but the principle of Lestrange is now morphed into a wider thing, is that you put your signature to a document, you're bound by the document. That's what we use it for today. But you're absolutely 100% correct on that, Michael. It's good. So let's take them one by one. We've got 3 things to look at. Is it a consumer contract? Is it a standard form contract? Is it an unfair contract term? So we know already it's a consumer contract. Now we're a little bit bogged down on whether it's a standard form contract. Okay? So standard form contract is a contract offered to the supplier on a take it or leave it basis. There are a number of factors the court will look at, section 27. So let's have a look at section 27. whether one of the parties had all or most of the bargaining power, whether the contract was prepared by one party before any discussions, whether another party was in effect required on either to accept or reject the terms. So it's usually one-sided. I reckon they are pretty one-sided, but was it given to her on a take it or leave it basis? What would have happened if she said, I'm not filling this in or signing it? Would she have got the bacon?
She would have had to or get a refund.
No, well, I'm just going back to the document. At the point of purchase, and before Christmas, she ordered 5 kilograms of bacon from her butcher to be delivered on 25th of January. The butcher gave her an order form with 5 kilogram bacon filled out under order details, and she filled in her name and address at the top, then signed the bottom. She knew there was a bunch of terms and conditions on the other side of the form, but she didn't bother reading them. All she knew that she wanted the bacon. Now,
well, she signed for the bacon. So, did he sign for the bacon? We didn't know.
Say that again, sorry?
I said she signed for the bacon, but did the butcher sign for it? That's what I wasn't sure on. It doesn't state, you know what I mean?
Well, she's ordered it from him.
Why does he need to sign?
Why does he need to sign?
No, I was just saying in terms of signed contracts, you were talking about if we go and look at other things like, signed contracts and the power that they have. Well, she signed it, but the butcher didn't sign it, so it's just his order form. So she signed for bacon.
Yes, but she knew there were terms and conditions on the back.
And that's just while we're there, before I forget, if you had a shop like that, don't do something silly like that. Put the terms and conditions on the front, because she may, in her mind, have known that there were terms and conditions on the back, but she may say in court, I didn't know. And we got a string of cases, and we looked at those recently. All those dry cleaner cases?
Yeah. No, I didn't read them. She didn't read them.
But she knew.
Yeah, she knew.
See, look, Lestrange, look, let me just say to you, I'm just doing the final paper at the moment, and issues like this are of relevance, okay? It's important to understand how signatures work and what do they bind you to. So we still haven't got past is a standard form contract. My gut feel is, look, I'll be hurt. I walk in, Mary, you're standing behind the counter. You give me an order. My name's on the top. The what I want to purchase is there. I've got the money in my hand. You ask me to sign it. I give it to you. What happens if I didn't fill it in? Well, I wouldn't get the bacon.
No, that's
so
right.
Maybe based on that, it is a standard form contract, because it's really on a take it or leave it basis. Mary could quite legitimately say, look, sir, I'm really sorry, but I need to have your order and I need your signature here to verify it, and this is what you want. And again, I repeat myself, it would have been better had there been the terms and conditions on the front. Simply, that may be difficult sometimes due to the size of the terms and conditions. Therefore, there should be a note quite clearly in red. The more onerous the terms, the more bigger the sign, or in a different colour. Better still is that a signature is required on the back as well. Now, if that's forgotten, you could say, the consumer can say, I didn't know. And so you're going to be really super careful with that. So that's just for discussion purposes, bringing it up. So that's the second of the three elements. The first is the consumer contract. Second, is it a standard form contract? And the third and final one, is it an unfair contract term? And so we've got four factors to look at: significant imbalance in rights and obligations. Do you think there's an imbalance? Remember, the Director of Consumer Affairs in Victoria and AAPT said it's of significant, it's important or of consequence. My gut feel it is a significant imbalance between the vendor and herself.
Agreed.
Was it really reasonably necessary to have that clause, and the clause, let's repeat that again.
To replace any meat unilaterally with any other meat.
There, you're right.
At his discretion.
At his discretion. Now, that clause is a very important clause.
I believe the word discretion is not brilliant either.
What does it mean?
Well, it could mean that he's got the bacon but decides he wants bacon sangers for dinner, and so he's not giving it to her, and he's discretionally giving her beef instead.
So it's like an illusionary contract almost, isn't it?
Mm.
Yeah.
Getting close.
Yeah.
Getting close. And see, the thing is, let's just talk about the most important thing for you guys at the moment. It's your tests and examinations and things like that. You just mention it. Just say, look, discretion, potentially maybe an illusory contract. And that's what gets you marks, because it shows you've been thinking these things through. Now, where were we? So, so was that reasonably necessary? Remember the train station gymnasium contract, where the judge found it was perfectly reasonable to have this onerous condition inside. Is it reasonable here?
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, it's an interesting area there. I'm just looking here.
I think if it had maybe been worded differently, it comes back to it depends, I guess. But if it had said with any other form of like meat instead of any other form of meat, like there was no like for like product, there was no.
Yeah, it was general, wasn't it? That's what blew me. I just thought, oh wow, that can't be right.
Because I would be really pissed
He'd be out
if
of
I ordered bacon and got liver.
exactly, or lamb's brains, or trife or something.
Yeah, well, the definition of meat is pretty wide, and as we said before, for some people in the community, it even extends beyond the traditional. I had a traditional definition in the back of my mind. I had no idea that poultry and game would be seen as meat, but they are seen in some quarters as meat.
But there's not even personal morals. There's also religious reasons, and you serve my kid something, and they're just gonna, it's what you're planning, your intentions for it. Doesn't matter what the meat is.
Exactly. So let's take a religious person who doesn't, which there's a number of religions which don't eat pork. So I, for my family, want a good quality steak, and there's been a bit of rush on it, and the butcher substitutes what he or she thinks is acceptable. In this case, it's pork. That's not acceptable to me. And so therefore, this could be seen to be unreasonable, and going on to the next one, causing detriment. And if we go later on in his notes, he talks about other examples of unfair contract terms, section 25. And a couple of times I've read it out to you already, examples of unfair terms. Remember what Anthony said in his notes? He said, these are just examples. There are other ones, but don't get fixated on it because it just gives you a feel of it. Without limiting section 24, the following are examples of the kinds of terms of consumer contract that may be unfair. G, a term that permits or has the effect of permitting one party unilaterally to vary the characteristics of the goods or services to be supplied. So I reckon you could mount a reasonable argument. Now, when you guys graduate and you go into the law, or you often go, a lot of people go into the law before they graduate. They work in a solicitor's office, they work in a quasi-legal environment. You just have to remember, there's no such thing as an open shut case. Some of them get reasonably close, but there are a lot of them like this, and you just have to argue. And you speak to your clients and you just have to say, are you willing to take the risk? Whether it's a business client or mum and dad. It's to do with a car. Mary, you were talking about before, so you take action against this company. You're not 100%.
Well, I couldn't, because they packed up in it. They didn't even sell them in Australia, and unless I have to go to Russia, and I couldn't even read the act because it was in Russian. So it was pretty bad.
When you finish your law degree, you can do an arts degree in Russian, okay?
I don't think so. I know a couple of different languages from being in different parts of the world, but no, I don't need to learn any more languages then.
When I was in Bali, I had to laugh. There's Kentucky Fried Ayam.
Yeah, I chicken. Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. So we've looked at significant imbalance, not reasonably necessary, causing detriment. We've looked at other examples, and I have to say there is a flavour of unfairness about this. Okay, and that's and you get that right from the very beginning. But when you look at the constituent parts of the legislation, and we've got Lestrange and Graucob, which. So what effect does Lestrange and Graucob have on this tutorial question? Remember, she signed it. And she admitted she saw terms and conditions.
She didn't see or look and see the terms and conditions on the back.
Well, that's her problem, isn't it? Because she was aware of them.
She was aware of it. She didn't write it. So...
But Anthony puts all these things in to make it a bit more difficult to give students a hard time. He's a cruel man. And has this issue of Lestrange and Graucob got any relevance to the question at all?
I believe yes.
Yes. In what way?
In today's world, it's unfair terms, and in today's world of the ACL, that case would have been changed. Would have a different outcome.
If we completely...
But he doesn't put a date on it, though. There's no date on it, so why would it be different now to before?
Well, the laws have changed since Lestrange happened today. The ACL's now...
I see. Okay, all right. I've got it.
But remember,
Michael, thanks.
Remember, Lestrange and Graucob is the proposition for you're bound by your signature.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you'll come along and change that.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Michael has a good understanding of the case and how it be interpreted today.
Yeah.
But
I ask a lot more questions. I probably don't phrase them as that. Like I'm just trying to get my head around it. You know what I mean? So I'm grateful to Michael because he does explain it very clearly, and also to Deb and yourself, because I'm like contract law is something that's so new to me and so much information. I'm really trying to grasp it,
I'll send you an invoice, okay? For legal fees.
I thought it was chocolates for Michael. I'd like to earn at least one chocolate before the end of this.
If we get back to Lestrange and Graucob, if we completely deleted that sentence about her signing the contract, how would that affect things here?
With her case here,
sorry,
would it still be an unfair contract?
Yes,
would she still get a remedy?
Yes, she still would.
I reckon she probably would, because it's on a take it or leave it basis. And you and I both know that a contract can be either verbal or in writing, or part thereof. Hence, when I write contracts, I have an entire agreement clause. I think Anthony calls them an entire contract clause. Just remind me, someone, what's an entire contract clause?
4 corners.
Yeah, it says the entire contract lives in this document. So this week's lecture notes is
4-corner rule.
Is 16 pages. If this is a 16-page contract, I don't want. I'm the vendor and you're the purchaser, Michael. I don't want you later on coming and saying, "Oh, but such and such from my office said this." I say, Michael, that may have been the case, but you see there's an entire agreement clause which states the entire agreement lives in this document. Okay? And that's what you want. You don't want issues outside. But listen, let's stick to what's happening here. I reckon it's an unfair term, and then it's what will happen then? So the first thing what she would do is she would go to the court and say it's an unfair term. What would the judge say, or the person handling the case say?
Well, you should have read the terms before you signed it.
Yeah, but the legal effect of going to the court and claiming that a contract is unfair, automatically that means that the other party, in this case the vendor, has to.
I think you give it the bacon before it got that far, don't you?
Look, if she goes to the court and the court then says to the vendor, the obligation is on you, vendor, to state why it's not unfair. And then then afterwards the court will listen to the vendor and come down with a ruling. If the ruling was unfair, what would happen then?
It was voidable.
Yes.
It's a refund.
And in fact, more than voidable. Section 23 says it's completely void. I mean, it was void on her option.
Yeah.
Well, it's not her option because she can't force the guy into it. But she can try. But it's void. Now that clause is plucked out. Now, if that clause is plucked out, one of the conditions said that if the ordered meat was unavailable, the butcher could unilaterally replace it with any other form. Now, on one view of that clause, it's quite reasonable because the poor guy's sold out and he can put something else there. But on another view, which we've looked at, it's unreasonable. Okay.
But she pre-ordered and prepaid, so the first thing you do, if you're a good business person, is you put the pre-ordered and prepaid away before you sell what's left.
Yeah, and therefore, it is probably unreasonable after all, based on that very sensible advice.
Yeah. So that's how I sort of thought it was unreasonable.
Well, Debbie, what do you think? How would you reckon that part, question B, refund from the butcher, how do you think that would go?
I think she's got good cause for it.
Yeah. Michael, what about you?
Oh, I think she's in the right.
It's good.
There was 6 weeks' notice. It was a smaller purchase. It wasn't a custom purchase. It was a standard purchase from that shop.
Yeah.
And hence the document to sign and terms and conditions.
Yeah. And Mary, did you have anything you want to say after that?
No, I thought she had a good case because I sort of thought, well, what kind of business does that? Takes a prepaid order and then sells the actual goods to somebody else, unless he did it for a higher price or something. He's still a shop. You just don't. You'll never stay in business. And my thoughts were this butcher shop's not going to last long, maybe a week.
Yeah. Okay. Now, Michael, you asked a question about assessment 4, and I'll look into that in the next 24 hours, send an email out over that. And,
can I confirm what date the actual exam is?
Yeah.
Next one.
The following Monday and Tuesday. So that's
so
put it in an email out. So it's 5 and 7 is 12 and 13. It's going to be released over 2 days.
36 hours.
36 hours.
Next Thursday, we've got the intro exam, Cyril, so a lot of us won't be here.
Next Thursday?
Yeah, we have the introduction to law exam at this time.
Oh, okay. Well, what you do is just tune in at another time, okay?
Yeah.
When I mark the papers, I can certainly tell who's sort of going to the tutorials and who's not. It became pretty obvious, But anyway, it's not categorical because I only saw numbers, but you could tell by what was in the papers and what was not in the papers. Thank you very much. What I'm going to do is send you a notification as to assessment 4 and assessment 5, and we take it from there. And I'll finish these questions off. And that's it. So, look, I wish you all the best, and take it easy. And we'll see some. Maybe we'll see some of you next Thursday. If not, look it up. And if I don't see you guys again, Debbie, it was nice to have you, and your little boy Ryan.
Sorry about that.
Nice to see you because you've had a lot of difficulties. And Michael, you've been a standard person around. And what's the name of the little dog?
Gonna laugh, Flapjack.
Flapjack. Well, I hope to see him in a tutorial where you licking out of the bowl and him sitting there asking questions. Okay. Everyone, wish you all the best. Right.
Thank you.
See you later.
See you
Bye-bye.
in contracts B, I guess. If I
I know,
survive,
it's up to the boss.
if I survive and pass contract A, you might see me again.
Well, if I survive and pass contract A myself, it all depends on the boss, and don't ask me, I just work here, okay? See you later. Bye-bye.
See ya. Thanks. Bye.